From robots performing daily tasks to breakthroughs in industrial automation, China's innovations promise to transform global industries, enhance public services, and ease labor shortages. So how will these advances reshape our daily lives? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. China is making bold strides in technology, with humanoid robots now racing, playing sports and tackling tasks once reserved for humans. These developments are part of a broader national push into cutting-edge fields like artificial intelligence, smart manufacturing, clean energy and space exploration. The investment firm Morgan Stanley says the global humanoid market could reach nearly 1 billion robots by 2050. Well, there is much to talk about. Later, we'll hear from two tech analysts, but first, Liang is a chair professor in economics at Willamette University, and Andy Mock serves as a senior research fellow with the Center for China and Globalization. Thanks to both of you for being with us. Andy, let's start with robotics. It's a national priority for China and is used, as I said, in manufacturing, firefighting, and even space exploration. Liang of the Beijing Economic Technological Development Area recently talked about the impact of using more robots. This is part of what he had to say. Let's watch.
We don't believe robots will make people unemployed. Rather, they'll boost efficiency, take on tasks humans are unwilling to do, like exploring the vast universe or the ocean depths where people can't go. Machines can assist us in that exploration, and for example, when it's nighttime and humans need rest, machines could keep working, giving us better, cheaper, and more user-friendly products. So we see this as the direction for our future development.
So, Andy, what can you tell us about the progress that's being made, as well as the impact it's going to have on society?
Well, Anand, I think that first of all, it's pretty clear that China is ground zero for this unfolding robotics revolution. One, because of the size of its market, but also because of the vigor of its private sector and the support of government. But I think what's really important to point out here is that China really has delivered a seemingly unending series of technological breakthroughs, from space exploration to electric vehicles to high-speed rail. And there's, I think, important to point out that China is not particularly the master of any particular technology, but what its secret superpower is something that's called systems engineering, or the ability to plan long-term complex projects. And in China, this is called top-level design, where systems engineering is applied to technology, finance, supply chains, and government policy, all working towards a single strategic end state. And I think this is the way we can understand what's happening in the robotics sector, that will in some ways be a replay of what China has accomplished with high-speed rail, with electric vehicles, with solar panels as well.
Right, and Andy, I would presume there is a powerful synergy between the state, which directs policy and in some instances provides financing, and the enterprises that are creating all these new technologies.
That's absolutely right, Anand. And again, I think come back to this idea of systems engineering or top-level design, that China is able to bring together all of these inputs. But there's actually something else that's very important that I think is worth pointing out as well. It's not just systems engineering, but it's the cultural substrate of humility and 吃苦, or the willingness to eat bitterness. And I think nowhere is this better illustrated than we look at the story of CATL, who's become the largest battery maker in the world. Because Chinese people have a willingness to do things that are difficult, do not appear very exciting or sexy. So if we look at battery chemistry or electrochemistry, very tedious, really all about very incremental improvement. But again, because of this spirit of humility, not seeking or demanding things that appear sexy or exciting, but really to put in the grinding work that really builds the foundation of technological breakthroughs, I think is a necessary but not sufficient condition that is not widely recognized as contributing to China's technological breakthroughs.
Liang, great to see you. There are currently something like 1.5 million robots in operation in China. That's quite a big robot population. And there are Chinese factory owners who are now experimenting with highly automated plants where these robots continue working. You don't have to switch the lights on or off. They work in darkness as well. And Morgan Stanley, as I mentioned, the investment bank, expects the global humanoid market to grow to $5 trillion by 2050. So, Liang, where do you see the greatest economic impact?
Well, good to talk to you, Anand. So I think you're right that the robot market is huge and is developing very quickly in China, as we know that China adopted more robots, industrial robots in 2023 than the rest of the world combined. And I think that is really driven by this strategic vision that China needs this extra labor as the population is aging, and also that it's very crucial to drive technological innovations and also productivity growth for China to graduate out of the so-called middle income trap. So I think China has made a lot of efforts in developing the robotics industry. As you just mentioned, the state has really play a very vital role from very upstream, getting all the minerals and also cultivate all these talents in universities, right? So I think the recent report has just shown that the reason that China is so dominant in the rare earth mineral industry is because it's a huge undertaking. The government has helped to implement, all these rare earth chemistry departments and programs in 39 universities in China. And also helped a lot to build the overseas mining industries and processing industries in Africa, Latin America, and so on and so forth. And the government is also establishing this $138 billion, the so-called national venture capital funds in March to continue to help to power and finance all these technologies. And the entrepreneurs, as you just mentioned, I think Huawei spend about 20% of the revenues in R&D and also have half their employees involved in R&D. So all of these just show the great efforts that China is making is now really reaping the benefits. China is leading in so many cutting edge technologies and help to improve their productivity and reduce wastes and also accelerate the development cycles for the products. So I think these technologies can be utilized in many different industries and really power China's innovations and productivity growth going forward to cultivate the so-called high quality productive forces, of course.
And Andy, China says that it will engage internationally in AI development, especially with the countries of the global south. There's been that fear expressed many times when we look at how technology is advancing, that the developing countries could get left behind. There could be that digital gap there, but China wants to close that digital gap. I mean, what could this mean for the developing world to make sure that it is not left behind in this sort of technology curve that we're seeing?
So, Anand, I think that what China is doing is really radical in terms of artificial intelligence development, in that the leading companies in the West, primarily those in the United States, are approaching artificial intelligence as they've approached every other major technological breakthrough, whether that's electricity or the internet, as an enormous profit-making opportunity. And this is why we've seen companies, the so-called Magnificent Seven in the United States, valued at trillions of US dollars in terms of market cap. But when we look at how China is approaching artificial intelligence, the most important technologies developed in China are open source, meaning that they're essentially free to use by anyone, individuals, companies, governments around the world. And I think this demonstrates a profound difference in values, that China sees technology as a way to improve the state of mankind, and especially for developing countries in particular. So I think this is a very, very different philosophical approach that is paying enormous dividends, not just uplifting people around the world, but I think also gaining friends and supporters for China all around the world, and even converting some of its harshest critics. So I think back to when DeepSeek was released. Mark Andreessen, who developed the first web browser and is one of the top VC investors in the United States, said that this was a great contribution to mankind. And Mark Andreessen also, I think, is known, again, as a very harsh China critic. So I think China's doing remarkable things in the artificial intelligence space, not only pushing the frontiers of technology, but making sure that the fruits of these advances are available on an equitable basis to everyone in the world.
Liang, Andy raises an important point there, and that is the manner in which these technologies are developed in China. It's open source, and he cited the example of DeepSeek, for instance, which was produced and developed at a fraction of the cost of foreign competitors in this particular field. So what about the economics of AI development, of robot development, etc.? How does that work?
Well, I think the economic benefits, right, will be tremendous and very far-reaching. As we just talked about, AI is really the next generation technology, and it's also an all-purpose technology and can be adopted and utilized in many different industries, be it agriculture, services, or industrial sectors. And so I think that would really help to drive not only this particular sector's growth, right, which is $1 billion, hundreds of billions of dollars of worth of industry, but also really provide widespread benefits to the rest of the industries. And I think China play, again, a very significant role in diffusing its technologies and sharing its technologies with the global South. I think AI is one example, as you talked about, its cost effectiveness and also open source. But also, let's not forget, Huawei has been laying a lot of the telecommunication infrastructure in the global South, in Latin American countries, in Asia, in Africa. And I think that is also very important. Not to mention, I think, China's formidable manufacturing capacity is allowing many of these renewable energy costs to go down. China is contributing to 60% of the production of the batteries, 70% of solar panels, and 80% of the solar panels, and all of this help to drive down the costs. So other countries are able to utilize these green energy technologies to build their own infrastructure and utility to be able to power the technological development. And China is also directly, have a lot of technological sharing by, setting up technology demonstration zone in Africa, for example. But also, I think, with the Chinese companies now are, investing and building their supply chains overseas, those are also very helpful to transfer certain technologies to the global South. Yeah. So in a way, I think, all these technological development not only benefits China economically, but definitely helps bridge the technological gap in the rest of the world.
Right, Andy, very quickly, I've just got a minute left. One of the big challenges that China faces is that the United States is actively trying to block development of some technologies in China. I mean, it's choked off Chinese access to advanced chips, for instance, and this has led to China developing its own chip industry as well. I mean, what is your view of the efforts by the United States to deny China access to these key components and, in effect, try to block its technological rise?
Well, no, and I think it's widely recognized that these efforts are backfiring, but I think it's not widely understood why. And we have to understand that, especially in AI, it's not a parts race. So if the US cuts off the most advanced chips from NVIDIA to China, that doesn't slow China down because, again, I think what China has mastered is systems engineering. So it can over-engineer other aspects of the AI value chain to compensate for less powerful chips. And I think this is the story of DeepSeek as well. Through clever, sophisticated engineering, they were able to, as you said, build a leading AI model at a fraction of the cost. So I think this is clearly backfiring, and we see with the recent call between President Xi and President Trump that China has also the ability to throttle the U.S., in this case with rare earth metals. And we can see even from the tone and the demeanor of President Trump that he is much more chagrined, and I think has a much more realistic and conciliatory attitudes towards China. And my hope is that we can put some of this very destructive weaponization of technology behind us.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Andy Mok, Yang Liang, thanks for being with us. As we've been discussing, AI can be a pioneer in promoting social progress. CGTN's Wang Menji has more in this report.
Thinking like a human. This is where the study of AI begins. Since its first program was created in 1956, AI technology has experienced ups and downs. With the development of internet technologies and big data, including cloud computing and new chip technologies, AI rides the wave of social progress and subsequent changes. From smart home devices to autonomous driving, from medical care to education, from financial services to environmental protection, AI's influence can now be felt in every aspect of our lives. It seems as everyone is talking about AI. It holds the promise of remaking our world today. But which industries benefit the most? And where is this technology headed? With these questions, I knocked on the door of this year's Zhongguancun Forum, a grand stage for the concentrated display of new technologies, products and scenarios.
Not one single industry that will not benefit from the adoption and the subsequent deployment of AI technologies.
What has become more important for China and for other leading economies is the manufacturing sector. And manufacturing sector has a huge potential to make an ecosystem and facilitate the adoption of the artificial intelligence.
Well, the road to intelligence will not be built overnight. The spread of false information and so-called hallucinations are among the concerns raised in relation to AI.
We need to open wider to AI technologies. These technologies will help many industries improve efficiency and create value. But we also need to have a rational approach to AI.
Some people will say that AI will take away their jobs. AI is creating more job opportunities. New programs and new skills, new domains are opening up.
Pressure from many sides. But as technical upgrades and platform-level enterprises continuously improve services, experts believe more Chinese enterprises will benefit from AI. Furthermore, the country has adopted solutions to promote operations and applications of AI technology, from releasing of strategic innovation results to the unveiling of new research and development institutions. Since its founding 18 years ago, Zhongguancun Forum has become a window for China to actively join in on global science-tech innovation practices. That's why, based on this year's discussions, we can have a clear picture of China's answer to AI. Wang, CGTN, Beijing.
For more on AI and China's advances in technology, we're joined now by journalist Emil Protalinski. He is an editor for the technology news site Techmeme and a communications consultant at EPro Strategies. And we're also joined by Wang. He is founder and principal analyst at Constellation Research. Thank you so much to both of you for being with us. Wang, China has already invested very heavily on artificial intelligence and humanoid technology. What impact is all this technology going to have on Chinese economic development and growth?
It's going to be an accelerant to Chinese economic development and growth. One of the big things is really the ability to get the physical AI, which is the robotics. And when we look at what the critical important area is, it's having the rare earths, it's having the battery technologies, it's having a very, very low cost energy environment, and of course, a low cost manufacturing environment with the capacity. China has all those 5 factors, which means they could produce units probably at 1/5 the cost of the US, which means in the future, having the labor shortages that are prediction with a population decline, a lot of that can be addressed through automation. The second piece is really the advancements in terms of what AI is able to do with decision automation. Being able to make decisions more quickly, achieving decision velocity allows you to make faster decisions more accurately. And I think that helps with a lot of menial tasks and really in terms of policies, a lot of red tape, that frees up time for productivity and being able to work on more advanced issues and advanced intelligence areas. So taking the artificial intelligence and pairing with the human intelligence creates that kind of advantage. But I think the third thing, which is much more important, is really a relook as to what society is going to look like in a world with AI. And I think that changes everything. And that's where China has opportunities to get to efficiencies that it hasn't been able to hit in the past. But it's the energy equation that's really important, that manufacturing equation and the robot supply chain. That's really where the advantages are sitting on the China side.
Right, and Ray, just on that point of what society is going to be it's going to look like. I mean, there was one of the speakers in that report we just had who raised the point about employment. I mean, there is this fear that, you know, technology is going to take over jobs. But he made the point that it's actually going to create a lot of jobs. What's your view?
Both are true. We just don't know at what level. With epigenetics, we're going to be living to 80, 90, maybe 100 years old. And so what does that mean for the purpose and mission of humanity? So, well, we will be creating new jobs. For example, the manufacturing jobs that we were depending on in the past will go away. We'll have dark factories, and those will be heavily automated. But who's going to repair those factories, those robots?
Right.
Well, for humans for now, but it could be machines in the future.
Right. Emil, great to have you with us. Welcome to the show. Let's talk about the Chinese supply chain. Of course, China has a very sophisticated supply chain globally. It is well developed. It's very complex as well. I mean, what kind of a role will that supply chain play as the rest of the world tries to develop its own technologies, its own humanoid technologies?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think many people tend to either ignore or not know too much about how much China's supply chains drive the world's electronics and technology businesses in general. If humanoid robots are indeed the future, Chinese tech will likely play a big role. There's just the big asterisk, and to echoing what you said, alternative supply chains are being built out, and it's frankly China's race to lose. But even if that were to happen, I imagine China's supply chain will still play a big role in humanoid robots. I can't imagine a world where China is not a major player.
And Emil, you know, one of the things about these kinds of technologies at this stage is that many people see it as something that's taking place out there. But if we look at the interface between, you know, just normal people and this kind of technology, I'm thinking of things like healthcare, education, etc. What kind of developments do you see coming?
Oh, I mean, it's hard to predict, but it's also, frankly, hard to imagine that there won't be major implications. I mean, we're already seeing it today. You can even see that there was a recent report out, I think it was just today or yesterday, that Amazon is developing software for package delivery humanoid robots, and it's building a humanoid park in San Francisco to test them out. So you have everything from robotics to, like you mentioned, education. You know, students are learning using AI, generative AI tools on the regular. They're frankly spending more time with them than they are with, you know, their teachers in school. So I think, and for healthcare, I mean, AI is a really broad term, but if we're just going to dive into just, for example, algorithms, you know, coming up with new types of drugs and examining how proteins fold, there's so many implications. It's really hard to keep track of it all.
Ray, China is also building more than 500 smart manufacturing demonstration plants. This is to develop industries and sort of accelerate the transformation from, I guess, what we would call now old industry to new industry. What does that mean? Could you explain that to us?
Yeah, there's lots of areas where this would be, right? We're thinking from biotech to semiconductors to space and quantum. These new factories are going to be highly automated. They're going to be highly smart. They're going to have very few humans there, and that's really the productivity gain that we're going to be seeing. When you saw a lot of the conversation about the massive direct foreign investment that's coming back to the U.S. for manufacturing, I mean, there's a romantic notion that there are going to be factory workers in these jobs. No, these are going to be heavily robotic, heavily automated. You might have maybe 1/3 the number of workers that would have been in a factory today, going down to maybe 1/10 in the next 3 to 4 years. So it's a very, very different environment. And in order for China to make that leap, they have to move from the industrial age to the smart factory age. And I think they're headed in that direction when they think about where that future is.
Emil, if we look at the pace of technology development in China, I mean, it's very, very, very rapid. Let's look at one example here. If we look at Apple's market share, for instance, in smartphones in China, at one time, it was a 70% share of the market that it had, while Huawei at the same time had 13%. Now, if we look at the figures, Apple has slipped to 47% and Huawei is at 35%. So how big a shift are we seeing?
Well, I mean, the numbers certainly speak for themselves. I think, though, that shift there's more nuance there, right? So China is still critical for Apple, and Apple is still critical for China. It's very clear that a decoupling is occurring, but that's driven almost entirely by geopolitics. And this has been years in the making, and frankly, it's going to take many years still. I don't think that story is over. And looking at just the market share numbers, I mean, Huawei is definitely gaining, and not just because of geopolitics, it's also gaining because of frankly its technology is getting better. But that's just from a consumer perspective. Apple, of course, has factory workers, really has trained many engineers in China to build the phones, and it's struggling, frankly, to move that out of China. So this story is not something that will be written by the end of this year. It's going to keep going.
Right, and Emil, we talk about these things in competitive terms, but do you see a time come when there'll be more cooperation rather than competition in developing these technologies?
I think so. I don't think that's in the short term, but I think in the long term, it's very possible that we will see a lot more cooperation.
Ray, the United States appears to have tried almost everything to win this tech race, talking about competition with China. But as we see, Chinese EVs, electric vehicles, are more advanced, more efficient. They're far less expensive than the ones being sold in the United States. China also dominates, for instance, if we look at commercial drones. It's very advanced in that field, and it produces the bulk of the world's solar panels, as well as battery technology as well. It's very advanced there. I mean, if this is going to be a race, how do you see it go to? Where do you see it go to from here?
Well, actually, I don't necessarily view it as a race. I view it as an issue in geopolitics, as Emil was talking about. I think what happened was, this current battle for dominance is really a battle for ideas, and technology is just one aspect of it. But if you look at a recent critical technology report that was issued by Harvard, I mean, the U.S. is still in the lead for biotech, semiconductor, space, and quantum, and AI. But China's catching up very quickly, especially in biotechnologies, especially in AI. And that's really because necessity is the mother of invention, right? If you take away chips, people are going to figure out how to do things more efficiently with the chips that they have or build better chips, right? And I think it's fueling itself in that regard. But it's also a part of policy, right? If for a U.S. company to do business in China, it's very difficult, right? You have to give up your IP. You have to give up a lot of things that you normally wouldn't give up to access a market. And basically what the U.S. is doing is saying, look, you want to access our markets, we're going to play the same game going forward. So it's really, this is just a policy issue in the long run. I hope there's more cooperation. There's a lot of advancements that everybody is looking for, especially when we look at the convergence of technologies between AI, biotech, and robotics. You're thinking about space, quantum, material science, and energy. These things are all coming together very rapidly.
And that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to both of you for joining us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington.